function h is defined by h of k equals ax plus b, where a and b are positive constants. All right, so let's just keep that in mind. The graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane passes through 0, 10, and negative 2, 3, 25 over 36. What is the value of a plus b? All right, so when they give you these two coordinate points and a general equation like we have here, ax plus b, let's just start plugging in the numbers and see what we can make of it, right? So h of x is just our output or our y value, and we can see here in the first one, our y value or output will be 10. So we have 10 equals, we don't know what a and b are, but we can figure it out from these values. So here it says that with the input of 0, so x equals 0, we're going to get an output of 10. Well, let's see. So a to the power of 0 is going to give us 1. So here we have 1. So 10 equals 1. So this is plus b. And so what added to 1 gives us 10? Well, that is going to give us a value of 9. So we still do not know what the value of a is, but we know whatever a is to the power of 0 is going to be 1. But we have now just found out the value of b, right? And it makes sense because b is a positive constant. Now what we want to do is tackle the second part. So the second part here is negative 2 comma 325 over 36. So let's see what we can do here now that we know what the b value is. So we know the output is going to be 325 over 36. So 325 over 36. And we want to set this equivalent to just our general form ax. So a, we don't know what that is. X here, in our case, right here it says it's negative 2. So negative 2. And we already found the b value from our previous journey up there. So that's going to be plus 9. And so now what we want to do is just solve for a, right? So we can subtract 9 on both sides. And this is actually interesting because 325 over 36, 9 times 36 is going to give us 324. And so when we subtract 9 on both sides, that's in reality is just subtracting 324 divided by 36. And this will be set equal to a to the power of negative 2. And so if we want to solve for a here, let's simplify the left side. That is going to be 1 over 36 equals a to the power of negative 2. And you can plug this into Desmos and solve it, but here there's just exponent properties. So a to the negative 2, that is the same thing here as just 1 over a to the power of 2. And so because we have 1 over 36 equals 1 over a to the power of 2, what we can do here is just disregard everything on top because we can take the reciprocal of both sides. So this in reality really is just 36 equivalent to a squared. So now what we can do is just solve for a by taking the square root of both sides. And on the SAT, when you take the square root, when you manually take the square root of something, you are taking the principal square root, and therefore you only want the positive solution. And so instead of negative 6 and 6, it's just going to be positive 6 as our final answer. So positive 6 here is our answer for a, but the question is asking for the product of a and b. So we know here that b is a value of positive 9, and a is a value of positive 6. So 9 times 6 is going to give us a value of 54, and therefore C is going to be our final answer. This problem says that the circle above has a center O, the length of arc ADC, the minor arc is 5 pi, and x equals 100. What is the length of arc ABC? All right, so if we look at this, what we want to do is set up a ratio, right? So the first thing we know is that the angle X is going to be corresponding with that arc ADC. So our angle X, we can just write this on top, would be 100, right? And so it's corresponding to arc ADC, which has a length of 5 pi. And so now they want us to determine what is the length of arc ABC, right? This side right here. This side right here. Right? So because we know that the circle is split up quite evenly, right? The degree value over here is going to correspond with that arc length of ABC. And so can we determine that angle? Well, we can't, because we know there's 360 degrees in a circle. And so if angle X is 100 degrees, we're left with 260 degrees, right? So this will go on top. And so now we can actually pretty easily figure out what our length of arc ABC is by just finding this corresponding value, right? So to do this, we have to do some simplification, or we can just find the factor actually, right? So from 100 to 260, that is a scale factor of 2.6x, or 2.6 times. And so we can assume that for the same thing on the denominator, to keep this ratio constant, we also have to multiply this by 2.6. And so here we can just do 5 times 2.6 pi. And that's the same thing as multiplying 5 pi by 2.6. So 5 times 2.6, that will give us 13, right? And then we can just add the pi at the bottom, or next to it. So we get 13 pi as our final answer. So the answer here is B. All right, this one's pretty straightforward. It says the given function f, function models the number of advertisements a company sends to its clients each year, where x represents the number of years since 1997, and x is in between 0 and 5. If y equals f of x is graphed, which of the following is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph in this context? Okay, first off, let's find the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is your y value when your x value is 0. So right here, you see our x value. If we plug in 0, if we raise any number to the power of 0, that's equivalent to a value of 1. So 1 times 9,000 is 9,000. So we know our y-intercept in this case is a value of 9,000. So any answer choices with the number other than 9,000 is incorrect. So we're just going to eliminate A and C here. And now we have to put it in context. Okay, so what does this problem or scenario give us? Well, it says where x represents the number of years since 1997. I'm even going to do in green, another color, to really emphasize that. So x represents the number of years since 1997. So if x is 0, that means it has been 0 years since 1997. And if it's 0 years since 1997, that value of 9,000 must be representative for the year 1997 itself, right? And context is the number of advertisements that the company sends. And so that means in 1997, the company must have sent 9,000 advertisements. So let's see. B is minimum number estimated during the 5 years was 9,000. Makes no sense. It's not 5 years. It's just the singular 1997 year. So it's not B, must be D as our final answer. All right, so this SAT math problem says the first term in the sequence is 9. Each term after the first is 4 times the preceding term. If W represents the nth term of the sequence, which equation gives W in terms of N? All right, so first off, let's just cross out 2 answer choices. It cannot be A or B because they have the value 4 represented as the starting term, and then they have it reversed with the 9 being raised to a power, right? So because we know that the first term is 9, that is the starting value, right? We know that every term after that is 4 times the preceding term, and therefore the scale factor of 4 is being applied onto each consecutive value. Therefore, we can't have that consecutive application of the 4 times the preceding term if it is outside the parentheses being squared by n, right? So it cannot be A and it cannot be B. So is it either C or is it D? Well, this is key information. It says if W represents the nth term, so W represents the nth term, and we know the first term right now is 9, right? So if we know the first term is 9, that means if we plug in 1 for n, we should get a value of 9, right? So for this first problem right here, we have 9 times 4 to the power of n. So that's just 9 times 4. We get 36. 36 does not equal 9. But for D, we get 9 times 4. 9 times 4. N, which you know is 1 because it represents the first term. So 1 minus 1 is 0. Anything to the power of 0 will give us a value of 1. So 9 times 1 is 9, and 9 is 9. Therefore, our answer choice here is going to be D. The value of a collectible comic book increased by 167%, from the end of 2011 to the end of 2012, and then decreased by 16% from the end of 2012 to the end of 2013. What was the net percentage increase in the value of the collectible comic book from the end of 2011 to the end of 2013? All right, so first off, from 2011 to 2012, we've got, let's just call the starting value of the starting value of the end of 2011 as X. And now we're going to apply a value of 167% to the end of 2012. All right, so X here. So 167% can also be represented as 2.67 as our scale factor. Now, why? Well, because you can either think of it as a 100% increase is just a 2x multiplier, and therefore you can just add the 0.67 over it, or you can use the formula 1 plus or minus, depending on the increase or decrease, over percent over 100, right? So here, if we were to plug in 167, right, 167 divided by 100 would be 1.67, and 1 plus 1.67 would give us 2.64. So now here, know that our current value at the end of 2012 is 2.67x. But we want to find the net percentage, right? And we know from 2012 to 2013, it actually decreased by 16%. So we can just use our formula over here, 1 minus 16 over 100. And this will give us a value of 0.84, right? Cool. So we know that the value of 0.84 will be applied to this value, right? The value we had at the end of 2012. And so we have 0.84 times 2.67x. And so to find the net percentage here, we just multiply these two values. 0.84 times 2.67 gives us a value of 2.2428. This is not the percentage, it's a scale factor, right? So now we can utilize this equation again. So we set this equal to 1 plus percentage over 100, and we just solve for that percent change, right? So we can subtract 1 on both sides, then we get 1.24 something, and we multiply both sides by 100, and so this will ultimately give us around 124%. So around 124% increase matches up with answer choice A, and therefore that is our answer. Dot plots represent the distributions of values in dataset A and B. Which of the following statements must be true? So clause 1 says the median of dataset A is equal to the median of dataset B. And that's true because both distributions here you can see are symmetrical. If I were to draw a line down the middle, you have a equal number of points here and equal number of points on both sides, right? And so if you order the points from least to greatest and then you converge in the middle, you can see like on the ends, the 10 and the 16 cancel out, all the 11s and the 15s cancel out. You're always left in the middle with a value of 13. So let me just erase all that. So we know that the first clause here is true. So it can't be B and cannot be D. Let's see if the second clause is true. So it says the standard deviation of dataset A is equal to the standard deviation of dataset B. So here's the thing with symmetrical distributions, right? So when you got a symmetrical distribution, and you can calculate this if you don't remember this on the exam or something, is that when you have a symmetrical distribution, the mean and the median are the same, all right? They're equal. And so you can kind of see this in the points. You got a value of 10 and 16. Because it's symmetrical, they should theoretically not cancel out, right? But you're going to get a mean of 13, right? 16 plus 10, what is that? 26. 26 divided by 2 is 13. We have 4 points in the 11 section and 4 points in the 15 section. If we were to zoom in on one of those pairs, you got 11 and 15. That's also 26 divided by 2 is 13. You can see how here all the points in the pairs come back to the mean of 13. We know the median is 13 and the mean also is 13 for these symmetrical distributions. Now, going back to standard deviation. Standard deviation is the measure of spread in a data. So the farther away a point is from the center, you know that it is going to have a greater standard deviation. And so because even though they're both symmetrical, right, dataset A and dataset B looks different, right? It has like more points at 15, or has the same number of points at 15 and 11, but only has 1 point at
13. Whereas dataset A has a more condensed standard deviation here because of all those points at 13. And so their standard deviations cannot be the same. And therefore, the correct answer here is going to be A.
A circle in the xy plane has its center at coordinates -4, -6. Line K is tangent to the circle at points -7, -7. What is the slope of line K? So this is an interesting problem because when you talk about like geometry on the SAT, you don't really get too much into the obscure concepts. So we have tangent lines on a circle. This one thankfully is quite simple and straightforward, so I'll show you how it's done. So if we draw like the coordinate plane here, and we know that the circle has its center at these coordinates, -4, -6. So it's like gonna be somewhere, I don't know, like right here. And we don't actually know the radius of the circle. We probably could calculate it using these points and finding the distance and stuff, but that's not really relevant for our problem, and you'll see why. So line K is tangent to the circle at the point -7, -7. And so -7, -7 is out here somewhere. And so, I mean, the radius is going to be like somewhere like this. So we have that. That's a really lopsided, ugly looking circle and probably not drawn to scale or accurately. This is just a visual representation. And so line K, I'm going to draw in black here, is tangent to the circle at this one point right here, which means the tangent line is going to go through like this, because tangent lines are going to hit at only one point on that circle. So it'll go infinitely on both sides. And so we want to know the slope of this line. So the only way to determine the slope of this line is to use the information we already know. So we know two coordinate points, right? And these two coordinate points, only one of them are actually on line K. And so what we need to do here is actually find the slope of the perpendicular line to line K. So if we draw another line through the green line, that's a bad diagram. So we draw it through like this. Just pretend that's a straight line. You can see that the green line is going to make a perpendicular angle with line K. And so those are perpendicular lines. And perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. And therefore, what we need to do is actually just find the slope of line K, find the slope of the green line here, and then we can find the slope of line K. So the slope of the green line, let's draw over here, is going to be based on these two coordinate points. So the equation is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so here, let's just look for the change in y. So the change in y, we're going to be going from -7, -7 to -4, -6. And so the change in y, which is -7 to -6, that's a change of +1. So +1 on top. Now the change in x, so we're going from -7 to -4. That's an increase of +3. And so, right, +3. And so we know the slope of this line is 1/3, and which makes sense because if you look at the diagram, it is positive. It's going to be positively linear, and therefore a positive slope as 1/3 makes sense. So then what is the slope of line K? Well, we just need to take the opposite reciprocal, and the opposite reciprocal here is going to be -3. And therefore our answer choice is going to be A. And yeah, that is how you do the problem. On May 10th, 2015, there were 83 million internet subscribers in Nigeria. The major internet providers were MTN, Globalcom, and all those other ones. By September 30th, 2015, the number of internet subscribers in Nigeria had increased to a value of 97 million. If an internet subscriber in Nigeria on September 30th is selected at random, the probability that that person selected was a MTN subscriber is 0.43. So 43% of that 97 million were MTN subscribers. There were P million MTN subscribers in Nigeria on that September 30th date. So this is interesting. So this information of 83 million internet subscribers in Nigeria on May 10th is irrelevant to our equation. It asks to the nearest integer, what is the value of P? And let's remind ourselves P is the million of MTN subscribers that are on Nigeria on this date. Okay, so I'm going to be using not an accurate equation, but it just helps to, think about it. So I'm sure we've all heard of part over whole, right? It's pretty common in chemistry. So we kind of want to think about it like part over whole. So if we think about it, the whole value is just what we have in total, right? And what we have in total right now
in terms of all the subscribers, internet subscribers in Nigeria is 97 million. So we just write 97 million there. And now we have to think about the whole, right? So now we have to think about the part. So the part is the number of MTN subscribers, right? So we know that the number of MTN subscribers is in terms of P, but P by itself is P million, right? So what we really have is P times 1 million. Boom, boom, boom. Running with the mouse is hard. All right, so now what you have to understand about part over whole is that finds percent composition, right? But we're not talking chemistry. We want to find the percent composition, quote unquote, of MTN subscribers in Nigeria, right? So of that 97%, what percentage of those subscribers were MTN subscribers? Well, that information is given right here, 0.43, which translates to 43%. So we can give a value of 0.43 here. So now it's pretty simple. We just have to solve for the value of P. So to do this, you just plug it into Desmos, right? But first, let's simplify this out, because if you type 1 million over 97 million, it's going to give you an error because it's just such a small number. So what we can do here is just simplify, right? So we have P, and then we just divide the 1 million by 1 million and divide the 97 million by 1 million. So we get P over 97 equals 0.43. And so you just chuck this into Desmos. I rewrote it differently, but essentially you just chuck it into Desmos and find the value of P, or you can name it X. Find an intersection here we can see is 41.71. We want to the nearest integer the value of P, and therefore our answer here is going to be P equals 42.
Cube has edge length 68 inches. A solid sphere with a radius of 34 inches is inside the cube, such that the sphere touches the center of each face of the cube. To the nearest cubic inch, what is the volume of the space in the cube not taken up by the sphere, right? So it's not taken up. All right, cool. So first off, let's just find what we know, right? Because we want to find the volume of the actual cube since they give us the edge length. We know that a cube, the volume is just length times width times height, right? So we have 68 here. So what we can do is just use 68 cubed equals 314,432. All right, that's cool. So that's our total value now, right? But what we have is this solid sphere inside with a radius of 34 inches. Well, how do we find the volume of a sphere? Pretty simple here. We have 4/3 times pi times r cubed. All right. So since we have 34 inches as our r radius value, we can just plug in 34 here, cube that, and we get, what is that, 164,636. So if you do the math here, we got our total, right? Our total volume, which I really should have put units, but it's whatever. And then we've got the volume of the sphere. So if we want to find the volume inside the cube not taken up by the sphere, we can just subtract this value right here from our total value. In doing the math there, we will get the answer choice A, and that is our answer.
All right, so this last question I picked out because it's sort of non-traditional, right? It's not something you're going to see often, but I think it's a really interesting problem. So it says, what is the area in square units of the triangle formed by connecting the 3 points shown? So, I mean, we have 3 points and we want to know what the area is. So let's just connect these 3 points and we can see that it's going to make a triangle. So let's just connect these points. And the thing with this is you have to realize is we're not going to be calculating like the distance between these points and then using like base times height or whatever. So what we need to do here is actually use a strategy that is common on the geometry region. So for those of you who don't know what the regions are, if you live in New York, you have like state assessments, whatever. So one of the popular problems is like you got to find the area of a triangle and stuff. And how you would do that is just enclose the shape within another shape that is easier to calculate. So in our case, we want to use a rectangle, right? So we draw this out, we can enclose this entire shape within rectangle. So there we go. So we can just find the dimensions of the rectangle, and you can see that the rectangle here has a let's see, what is this, -3? So 7 units on this side
and then on the top it is 8 units. So here we have 7 times 8, and so we can see that at most, obviously, it's going to have an area of 56. So what we're going to do now is find the area of each of these individual triangles on the outside using base times height divided by 2. And therefore, once we find those areas, subtract it away from 56 and we'll find whatever we're left with in the middle. So let's start off with this top triangle. So we have 1 times, this looks like, what is that, 8. So 8 divided by 2. So we have 4. So this triangle right here is 4. And let's try this one over here. So this one is 7 down. And it is, looks like 7 across. So 7 times 7, that's 49 divided by 2 will give us, what is that, 24.5. And then our final triangle on this side, let's see, it's going to have a height of, looks like 6, so 6, and then a width of 1. So then 6 over 2 will give us the area of 3. So these are the different areas of the parts, or the external parts, that we want to subtract away from 56. So 56 subtract 4 is 52. 52 subtract by 3 is going to give us 49. Oops. 49. And then 49 subtract 24.5 will give us a final answer of 24.5. And therefore, our answer for the area in square units of the triangle is going to give us an answer of 24.5.